The alien Zorgans ruled over Earth with an iron fist. They had come from the stars, their ships darkening the skies as they descended upon the world. Humanity fought back, but the Zorgans were too strong. Cities burned, armies fell, and governments collapsed. In the end, the humans had no choice but to surrender. Now, most humans toiled in labor camps, their lives devoted to serving their alien masters. They mined resources, built machines, and worked in factories, all to expand the Zorgans' galactic empire. The lucky few who weren't sent to the camps instead worked directly for the Zorgans in their shining silver cities. One of these lucky humans was a woman named Mincio. She was a brilliant engineer whose skills had caught the attention of the alien overlords. They put her to work designing new weapons and ships for their armies. Mincio hated helping the creatures who had enslaved her species, but she had no choice. Refusal meant being sent to the camps, or worse. Despite the circumstances, Mincio never lost hope. In the quiet moments between her assigned projects, she would sketch designs for machines that could help the humans fight back. She would whisper with other servants, sharing dreams of a day when Earth would be free again. Mincio knew that she couldn't act openly against the Zorgans. Their technology would detect any obvious rebellion in a heartbeat. She needed to be smart and patient. She needed allies and resources. Most of all, she needed a plan. One day, while working late into the night on a new Zorgan warship design, Mincio overheard something intriguing. Two alien supervisors were talking in the hallway outside her workroom. They spoke of rumors about a hidden human rebel base. Mincio spent the next few days discreetly gathering information about the supposed rebel base. She was careful not to draw attention to herself, knowing that the Zorgans were always watching for signs of dissent. Her break came when she intercepted a series of encrypted transmissions coming from outside the city. The messages were heavily coded, but Mincio's skills in mathematics and programming allowed her to crack the cipher. What she discovered made her heart race with excitement. The transmissions spoke of a secret weapon that the rebels were developing, something that could turn the tide against the Zorgans. There were no specifics, but the mere possibility was enough to fill Mincio with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew she had to find a way to join these rebels, no matter the cost. However, escape would not be easy. The Zorgans kept a tight leash on their human servants, and the city was heavily guarded. Mincio would need to be clever and patient if she wanted to break free. Opportunity arose in the form of Juwu, another human engineer who worked in Mincio's department. She had overheard him muttering under his breath about the injustice of their situation, and saw in his eyes the same spark of defiance that burned within her. Mincio approached Juwu cautiously, testing the waters to see if he could be trusted. To her relief, he was more than receptive to the idea of escape. Like her, he longed for freedom and a chance to fight back against their oppressors. Together, Mincio and Juwu began to plot their escape. They studied the city's layout, memorizing the routes of Zorgan patrols and noting potential weak points in security. They squirreled away supplies, food, water, tools, anything that might be useful on the outside. Weeks passed as they planned and prepared, the danger of discovery always looming over them. But Mincio refused to let fear hold her back. Every day, the whispers of rebellion grew louder, and with them, her resolve strengthened. Then, on a night when the twin moons hung low and red in the sky, they made their move. Mincio and Juwu slipped out of their dormitory in the dead of night, using stolen security codes to bypass the locks. They crept through the city's sterile streets, hearts pounding in their chests as they avoided Zorgan patrols. At last, they'd reached the city's edge. Before them stretched the wild, untamed lands that the Zorgans had not yet fully conquered. Somewhere out there was the rebel base, and with it, the hope of freedom. With a last look at the only world they had known for years, Mincio and Juwu stepped out into the unknown. The journey ahead would be perilous, but it was a risk they were willing to take. For the first time in a long time, they were in control of their own destinies. As the city's lights faded behind them, Mincio felt a grin tug at her lips. The Zorgans thought they had crushed humanity's spirit, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The fight for Earth's future had only just begun. Mincio and Juwu trekked through the wilderness, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the Zorgan city. They moved at night, guided by the stars and the faint glow of their stolen datapads. During the day, they hid in caves or dense thickets, catching what little sleep they could. It was a hard journey. The terrain was rugged and unforgiving, with jagged rocks and thorny underbrush that tore at their clothes and skin. They had to ration their meager supplies, never knowing when they would find more. And always, there was the fear of being discovered by Zorgan patrols. But Mincio and Juwu pushed on, driven by the hope of finding the rebel base and the dream of a free Earth. They took turns keeping watch, one always on alert for any sign of danger. In the quiet moments, they shared stories of their lives before the invasion, finding comfort in the memories of a world that no longer existed. As the days turned into weeks, the pair began to worry. The encrypted transmissions had given them a general direction to follow, but no specific coordinates. What if they were walking in circles? What if the rebels had moved on, or worse, been discovered and wiped out? Just as their doubts began to overwhelm them, a stroke of luck changed everything. While scavenging for food in a seemingly empty valley, Mincio spotted something glinting in the sunlight. At first, she dismissed it as a trick of the light, but as she moved closer, she realized it was something far more significant, a piece of human technology, far more advanced than anything the Zorgans allowed their servants to have. Heart racing, Mincio called Juwu over. Together, they dug through the dirt and rocks, unearthing what appeared to be a damaged communications relay. It was a long shot, but if they could get it working, it might lead them to the rebels. They set to work, using every bit of their engineering skills to repair the device. It was a challenge without proper tools or parts, but Mincio and Juwu were nothing if not resourceful. They cannibalized parts from their datapads, rewired circuits with strands of their own hair, and powered the device with a makeshift battery fashioned from scavenged materials. Days passed as they worked, huddled over the relay in a hidden cave. They barely slept, too driven by the possibility of success to rest. And then, finally, a flicker of life from the machine. A static-filled transmission, faint but unmistakable. To any survivors out there, if you can hear this, follow the signal. Repeat, follow the signal. You are not alone. There is hope. Mincio and Juwu looked at each other, tears in their eyes. They had done it. They had found the key to the rebel base. Reinvigorated, they set off once more, this time with a clear destination in mind. The journey was still dangerous, but now they had a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just running from something, but running towards something. Towards hope, towards freedom, towards a future where Earth belonged to humans once again. Little did they know, their greatest challenge was still to come. Following the signal from the communications relay, Mincio and Juwu made their way deep into the mountains. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, with steep cliffs and narrow paths that wound through the crags. But they pushed on, driven by the promise of the rebel base that lay ahead. As they neared the coordinates indicated by the transmission, they began to notice signs of human activity. Footprints in the dirt, scraps of fabric caught on thorny bushes, the faint scent of cooked food carried on the wind. They were close. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the rocks above. "Halt! Identify yourselves." Mincio and Juwu froze, hands instinctively raised in surrender. From the cliff face, a group of figures emerged, clad in patchwork armor and carrying an assortment of weapons. They were human, but they looked nothing like the cowed servants of the Zorgan cities. "We're friends," Mincio called out, keeping her voice steady. "We escaped from the city. We're looking for the resistance." There was a tense pause. Then one of the figures, a woman with a scared face and a shock of red hair, nodded. "Follow us." Slowly, the pair were led through a hidden crevice in the rock, emerging into a sprawling cave system that had been transformed into a makeshift base. Salvage technology lined the walls, while groups of men and women huddled over maps and weapons. It was a far cry from the sleek, sterile Zorgan city, but to Mincio, it felt like home. As they were led deeper into the base, Mincio and Juwu couldn't help but notice that the majority of the rebels were women. It was a stark contrast to the male-dominated hierarchy of the Zorgans and their human servants. They were brought before the leader of the rebels, a tall woman with piercing eyes and a commanding presence. She introduced herself as Imni. "You took a big risk coming here," she said, looking them over. "How do we know you're not Zorgan spies?" Mincio met her gaze unflinchingly. "We're engineers. We've seen firsthand how the Zorgans operate, and we're sick of being their slaves. We want to fight." Yunhai's expression softened slightly. "You're not the first to come to us with that story, but you are the first engineers. We could use your skills." She went on to explain that the rebels had been planning an uprising for years, but had lacked the technical knowledge to truly challenge the Zorgans. With Mincio and Juwu's help, however, they might stand a chance. "Why are there so many women here?" Juwu asked, voicing the question that had been on both their minds. Yunhei smiled grimly. "The Zorgans underestimate us. They think we're weak, submissive. They don't watch us as closely as they do the men. It's given us an advantage in organizing the resistance." Mincio felt a swell of pride. She had always known that the Zorgans were foolish to dismiss the strength of human women. Now it seemed that mistake would be their undoing. As they were shown to their quarters and given their first assignments, Mincio and Juwu couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose that had been missing from their lives for so long. They were no longer just surviving, but fighting for something bigger than themselves. In the rebel base, surrounded by like-minded warriors, they had found not just a cause, but a family. And together, they would show the Zorgans just what human girls were capable of. In the days that followed, Mincio and Juwu threw themselves into their work with the rebels. They spent long hours in the base's makeshift labs, poring over schematics and prototypes. The rebels had been working on a secret weapon, but they needed the engineers' expertise to make it a reality. The weapon was a virus, but not like any virus Earth had seen before. It was designed to target the Zorgans specifically, bypassing their advanced immune systems and technology. Once infected, the aliens would be weakened, their mental and physical capabilities drastically reduced. It was a daring plan, but one that could turn the tide of the war. Mincio and Juwu worked tirelessly to engineer the virus and develop a delivery system. It was a challenge unlike any they had faced before. The Zorgan biology was different and complex, and they had to ensure the virus wouldn't harm humans. There were setbacks and frustrations, moments when the task seemed impossible. But the pair persevered, driven by the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on their success. They collaborated with the other rebels, learning from their diverse skills and experiences. Slowly, steadily, progress was made. Yunhai was a constant presence, overseeing their work and providing guidance. She shared stories of the rebels' past successes and failures, painting a picture of a movement that had been fighting in the shadows for years. Mincio and Juwu came to admire her resilience and leadership, and found themselves growing closer to their new comrades. However, the specter of the Zorgans always loomed. The rebels knew that they were working against the clock. Every day, more humans suffered under the aliens' rule. Every day, the risk of discovery grew. They had to move fast, but carefully. Finally, after weeks of intense work, the virus was ready. Mincio and Juwu presented it to Yunhai and the other rebel leaders, explaining how it worked and how it could be deployed. It was a tense moment, the culmination of all their efforts. Yunhai examined the data, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. "You've done it," she said softly. "You've given us a chance." There was a ripple of excitement through the gathered rebels. For the first time in years, victory seemed within reach. But Mincio and Juwu knew their work was far from over. The virus was just one part of the plan. They still had to find a way to distribute it to the Zorgans and coordinate a simultaneous uprising across the planet. It would be the greatest challenge the rebellion had ever faced. As they looked around at the faces of their fellow fighters, Mincio and Juwu saw a mix of hope and determination. These were people who had lost everything to the Zorgans, but who refused to give up. They were ready to fight, to risk everything for the chance at freedom. In that moment, Mincio felt a surge of pride and purpose. She had started this journey alone, a single spark of resistance in a dark world. Now she was part of something much bigger. She had found her place, her people. Together, they would bring the light back to Earth. Together, they would show the Zorgans the true power of humanity. The final battle was coming, and they would be ready. The plan was set in motion on a cold, moonless night. Under the cover of darkness, rebel infiltrators slipped into the Zorgan cities, armed with vials of the engineered virus. Their target, the aliens' food supply. By contaminating the nutrient fats that the Zorgans relied on, they could ensure the virus spread quickly and efficiently. It was a dangerous mission. If any of the infiltrators were caught, the entire plan could be compromised. But these were women who had been fighting in the shadows for years, women who knew the layout of the alien cities like the backs of their hands. They moved swiftly and silently, evading patrols and security systems with practiced ease. Back at the rebel base, Mincio and Juwu monitored the situation closely. They had hacked into the Zorgan communication network, listening for any sign that their plan had been discovered. The hours ticked by intense silence, broken only by the crackle of static and the occasional terse report from the field. Then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the word came through. The virus had been successfully deployed. The infiltrators were making their way back to base, undetected. Now, the real work began. Mincio and Juwu slipped back into the Zorgan city, this time not as servants, but as saboteurs. Their goal was to disable the aliens' defenses and communications, to sow chaos and confusion in the critical early hours of the uprising. It was a task they were uniquely suited for. They knew the Zorgan systems intimately, knew their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Moving through the city like ghosts, they planted viruses of a different kind, computer viruses designed to cripple the alien technology. As the Zorgans began to fall ill, struck down by the engineered plague, the human uprising began. Rebel cells activated across the planet, striking at key Zorgan installations. The aliens, weakened and disoriented, struggled to mount an effective response. In the cities, the human servants rose up against their masters. Armed with makeshift weapons and a lifetime of pent-up rage, they overwhelmed the Zorgan guards. The streets ran green with alien blood. Mincio and Juwu emerged into a city in chaos. Zorgan ships lay burning in the streets, while humans rallied under the rebel flag. It was a scene of destruction and triumph, of a people seizing their destiny with both hands. But the fight was far from over. The Zorgans were a powerful enemy, and they would not give up their hold on Earth easily. Even as they reeled from the first blow, they were regrouping, preparing to strike back. Mincio and Juwu knew that the coming days would be the hardest yet. They would have to fight for every inch of ground, to hold on to their hard-won gains in the face of a furious alien counterattack. But as they looked around at their fellow rebels, at the fierce determination in every face, they knew that they would not be fighting alone. Humanity was united now, bound together by a common cause. They had tasted freedom, and they would not let it go again. The Zorgans had underestimated them, had thought them weak and easily controlled. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. As the sun rose over a world in revolt, Mincio and Juwu took their place on the front lines. The battle for Earth's future had begun, and they would see it through to the end. Come what may, they would fight. For their planet, for their people, for the right to live free. The war against the Zorgans was long and brutal, but in the end, humanity prevailed. Weakened by the engineered virus, and faced with a united human resistance, the alien invaders were gradually pushed back. Their cities fell, Their ships were destroyed, and their armies were routed. Finally, after years of struggle, the last Zorgan stronghold on Earth fell. The aliens, their once mighty empire in ruins, fled back to the stars, leaving behind a planet scared by war but finally free. In the aftermath, the rebels emerged as the leaders of a new world. Yunhai, whose tactical brilliance and indomitable spirit had guided them through the darkest of times, was elected as the provisional leader of the newly formed global government. Her first act was to declare a new era, an age of rebuilding, of healing, and of hope. Mincio and Juwu found themselves at the forefront of this effort. Their skills as engineers were invaluable in rebuilding the shattered infrastructure of the planet. They designed new cities, ones that blended advanced technology with a respect for the environment and a focus on community. They developed clean energy sources and efficient transportation networks, laying the foundation for a sustainable future. But their work went beyond mere engineering. They were seen as heroes, as symbols of the indomitable human spirit. Their story, of two ordinary servants who had risen up to change the world, inspired millions. They were living proof that anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, had the power to make a difference. As the years passed, Earth began to heal. Cities rose from the ashes, green and vibrant and full of life. The scars of the Zorgan occupation faded, replaced by a renewed sense of unity and purpose. Humanity, once divided and oppressed, now stood together, united in their commitment to building a better world. Mincio and Juwu remained at the heart of this transformation. They continued to innovate, to push the boundaries of what was possible. They founded schools and research institutes, dedicated to fostering the next generation of scientists and engineers. They worked tirelessly to ensure that the hard-won lessons of the war were never forgotten, that humanity would never again fall prey to oppression and division. And through it all, they remained the closest of friends, bonded by their shared experiences and their unwavering commitment to each other. They had started their journey as two lost souls, seeking a way to fight back against their oppressors. They had ended it as the architects of a new world, the guiding lights of a resurgent humanity. As Mincio stood on the balcony of her new home, looking out over a city that she had helped to build, she felt a sense of profound contentment. The road had been long and hard, the sacrifices many, but in the end, it had all been worth it. Earth was free, humanity was united, and the future, once so dark and uncertain, now shone with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Mincio knew that there would be challenges ahead, that the work of building a better world was never truly done. But she also knew that she and Juwu, and all the brave souls who had fought beside them, would be there to meet those challenges head-on. For they were the guardians of Earth's future, the defenders of its hard-won freedom, and they would never, ever yield. Years turned into decades and decades into centuries. The world changed, as worlds are wont to do. Cities grew and evolved, technologies advanced, and new generations were born into a reality their ancestors could scarcely have imagined. But some things remained constant. The memory of the Zorgan invasion, and of the brave souls who had fought back against impossible odds, was never forgotten. It was taught in schools, commemorated in holidays, immortalized in art and literature. The names of Yuni, Mincio, Juwu, and the other rebel heroes became the stuff of legend, inspiring countless young girls to dream big and fight hard. Mincio lived to see much of this change. As the years passed and her hair grayed, she gradually stepped back from the day-to-day work of rebuilding and governing. But she never stopped being a presence, a guiding light for a world she had helped to save. She took particular joy in visiting the schools and academies that bore her name, in meeting the bright young minds that would shape the future. She saw in them the same spark, the same indomitable spirit that had driven her and Juwu all those years ago. And though the world they inhabited was very different from the one she had known, Mincio knew that the core of what made them human remained unchanged. The capacity for courage, for compassion, for unity in the face of adversity. These were the qualities that had saved Earth, and they were the qualities that would guide it forward. But Mincio never forgot the lessons of the past. She knew that the peace and prosperity they enjoyed were fragile things, hard-won, and easily lost. She knew that the universe was vast and full of unknowns, and that the Zorgans, or beings like them, could always return. And so, even as she grew old and her steps slowed, Mincio remained vigilant. She worked to ensure that Earth's defenses were strong, that its people were prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. She passed on her knowledge and her experience to new generations of leaders, ensuring that the wisdom of the past would guide the decisions of the future. On clear nights, Mincio would often sit outside, gazing up at the stars that had once brought such terror and destruction. She would remember the friends she had lost, the battles she had fought, the impossible odds they had overcome, and she would smile, knowing that the spirit that had guided them then lived on in the hearts of every human, the spirit of resilience, of unity, of hope in the face of darkness. The Zorgans had come to conquer, to enslave, to destroy. But they had failed. They had failed because they had underestimated the strength of the human spirit, the power of human love and loyalty. They had looked at humanity and seen weakness. But Mincio, and all those who had fought beside her, had shown them the truth. Humanity would never be conquered. Humanity would never be broken. As long as there were those who remembered, as long as there were those who carried the fire of rebellion in their hearts, Earth would remain free. And Mincio, the girl who had dreamed of stars and freedom, the woman who had helped lead a planet to its destiny, would be there to ensure it. Always.